Hey, it's great to be here. I want to thank y'all for hosting, Jim, wherever you went. Thank y'all very much for hosting today, and great to see Jeff and Shimkus. Good to see y'all today. As Rodney just noted, and look, I got to tell you, one of the best members of Congress. I love serving with him. Just a fantastic guy. He really is. So. Infrastructure. Rodney talked about this. Look, you look at this committee over decades and decades. We did things with bipartisan support. It was one of the few havens in Congress where you actually had a Big Four agreement, a true Big Four agreement that actually sustained through the process. And it was a great place to work. And look, we can fight over a lot of things, and there are a lot of good things to fight over, but infrastructure is not one of them. There was a comment about supply chain earlier today. I mean, look at the devastating impacts on supply chain today. Part of this is a result of our lack of investment and our lack of urgency tied behind actually not just investments in infrastructure, but also the infrastructure development process, the way that we actually plan, the way that we do pre-construction engineering and design activities in infrastructure. The good news is that in the past year, we did an infrastructure bill. The bad news is that the bill, in my opinion, has money that is poorly prioritized, and you're going to see it poorly executed. And I think in regard to next year, and certainly this is going to be Rodney's deal, but I think that you're going to see really aggressive oversight over that legislation in that space to make sure, one, that the dollars are put in the right buckets, that we're truly prioritizing it correctly. Just to give you an example, 13% of the last large grant program, 13% of all the funds went to the state of California. Nothing against California, well, I have a lot against California, but the reality is, yep, that's right. But the reality is that they're not using a real transparent metrics-based process. What Buttigieg did when he came out, as soon as he took the reins of the agency, he came out and he said, we're going to use climate change, we're going to use environmental justice, racial equity, enhancing union opportunities, addressing historically underserved communities. Look, I don't have a problem with any of these things necessarily, maybe union ones, but the rest of them. But just have transparent metrics on how you're going to do this, and don't just give us a black box and then kick it out and say, hey, California gets everything. The EV charging stations and other things. I think that they've done a flawed job prioritizing the funds, and so I'm really looking forward to working with Rodney and some of our other folks next year on aggressive oversight over that legislation. Lastly, on the aviation space, and something where I think Rodney and I share a real common interest. Look, you can look at all the forms of transportation, the roads, the water resources, pipelines, I mean, all across. We're decades behind where we need to be. I'd like to think that aviation is that one spot where we're actually a little bit further ahead than the rest, but we are quickly losing. We're quickly losing our advantageous position in the United States because the FAA really has gotten wrapped around the axle. Look at where technology is going. We're going from approving 737 a week into a scenario where we're going to see 5,000 drones come out a week. The FAA's organizational structure, their regulatory structure, cannot facilitate this onslaught of volume and technology that we're going to see, which is going to cause us to cede our aviation leadership role in the United States to countries like in the Middle East, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, all these countries that are trying to lean forward. It's not just about that platform, that drone. It's about every sensor that they're attaching to it. It's about healthcare. It's about delivery. It's about methane sensors for energy. It's about doing infrastructure analysis. We just passed 2 weeks ago or so a few bills to begin making progress. We're going to be working on a larger FAA reauthorization bill next year. But I'll tell you, one thing that I would like to do, and I think Rodney shares, is try and maybe grab a couple of rifle shot drone runman systems provisions and begin moving those a little earlier, having to do with type certification, having to do with beyond visual line of sight and things like FAA reorganization structure. So with that, thanks again for giving us a chance to join you all this morning, and looking forward to Q&A with one of the most amazing members of Congress that there is.
Look, the guy actually knows policy, and really I think that's what should excite the industry and the industries you work in, is that we're going to address at the policy level some of the things that as Garrett said, can hold American innovation back. And we've got an administration that tries to do what they can to increase the bureaucracy. We had the One Federal Decision Act that was part of the big infrastructure bill to limit all the environmental review processes to less than 2 years. I mean, it's not like it can't be done. All of our competitors are doing it. But they roll out some proposed rules and regs last night, and they're a disaster. They're an absolute disaster. And at the same time, you have Chairman DeFazio saying, administration, get that money out because some fantasy that Republicans are going to claw it back exists in his head. And it just doesn't, it's not congruent to what the administration is doing. And in the end, politically, it advantages us, but it hurts the country. When you have laws that were passed, even though we might not have supported them, we ought to make sure that they're implemented correctly. And drones, you mentioned drones. And I remember debating Peter during the FAA reauth that the last one we passed on kilos, because I passed an amendment that had any drone technology is 4.4 pounds or less says it should not be subject to FAA authorization, FAA approval. Well, FAA basically wrote the rule to where they still have jurisdiction over drones that small. So we've got to watch that agency. And Garrett said we are going to utilize our oversight responsibilities very effectively, and I think we're going to have a lot of fun doing it. Who's got questions?
Well, Matt, since you did such a great job with the introduction, I think you get the first pick.
That was a mediocre introduction. That was not that good.
Actually, Rodney, I know your real bio. I thought he did amazing.
I promised I'd stick to the script. So, well, thanks so much. Really, really appreciated the remarks.
Hey, that's a great question. Let me give you an answer.
So I'm going to go in a little bit of a different direction for the first question, but just with the news coming out yesterday about, not surprisingly, the, inflation, the situation there, I thought there was a really timely article in Axios this morning about inflation in the airline sector in particular. And, my question really is, so the Democrats seem to be focused on price gouging as the driving force behind the inflationary pressure we're seeing. I just wanted to ask, what is your perspective on what is driving inflation? And if it's not price gouging, which I probably isn't, how do you change that narrative? What types of what are you guys thinking in terms of countering all of these proposals that are just aimed at, scoring political points in the lead up?
Sure. So first of all, look, one of the most, and Alex Flynn here, who knows more about energy than the rest of us have forgotten, but look, the deal is that one of the most pervasive influences, I think, is the energy sector, and you've seen just extraordinary prices in energy, and in fact, just last night or early this morning, the administration announced that they are not going to hold a lease sale for offshore energy, where we currently produce like 18% of all the oil, 4 to 5% of all the natural gas. They're not going to hold one. This is the first administration in modern history that has not had a single lease sale. So, look, I think part of the problem is we go from Obama to Trump to Biden. Look, one of the things, and y'all work in the corporate world, and so one of the things that's really a reason why you make investments in the United States is because of the predictability, because of the certainty. Yet we've seen these wild pendulum swings, and so you're sitting here trying to plan investment. You're looking at a 10-year strategy or beyond, and you've got these wild changes. You got people that are running agencies saying we're not going to produce energy on our lands or waters. I mean, like, that is such a disruptive approach. And so do I think that there is a contribution from the return of the economy as COVID begins to appear to wane? Yes. Is there increased economic activity and demands? Yes. But I think that the greatest impact is energy prices. And I have never seen such inexperienced and flawed strategies in energy in my entire life. And I mean, I just, that's not a political statement. I have never seen such stupid policies on energy, and not just making a mistake as we all do and then fixing it, but doubling and tripling down on the same dumb things. You're seeing higher prices, you're seeing higher emissions, and you're seeing greater energy insecurity. That is having one of the biggest impacts. Now, the other thing is, because of all this uncertainty, pendulum swinging, all these threats on ESG and other things, if I'm a business person and I'm trying to make my investment strategy, I am being very conservative about my investments because I don't know what's going to happen. So do I think it's price gouging? No. Do I think people are holding back and waiting to see what's going to happen because there's so much craziness and uncertainty? Yes, and I think it is having an impact on supply-demand balance.
Well, Garrett's absolutely right when it comes to the lack of a focus from this administration on addressing energy issues. I learned all I know about energy policy from Mr. Shimkus, being in the car with him hours on end talking about energy policy. And when you look at what Garrett mentioned, is Obama to Trump to Biden, I actually think Biden's over here with the people that are advising him on not just energy policy, but economic policy. And actually, I think it's purposeful. I think they see that the end is coming, that they're going to have to deal with Republicans in the majority in the House and the Senate. And the far left that this administration kowtows to is running the show when it comes to supposedly dealing with the inflationary issues and the economic issues. They try to gaslight the American people into thinking there's no problem. But we know there's a problem. Every family knows there's a problem when they go to the gas pump, when they go to the grocery store. My wife commented to me just a few weeks ago, this cart used to cost $100. It now costs $200. That's real money having a real impact on American families, and they don't care. And what else they're doing? I talked to a CEO of a major energy company that's being adversely affected by energy policy, not just here, but also at the state level in our home state of Illinois. They've got a coal-fired power plant in my district. And of course, I told them, hang on, help's on the way. But in the end, they said what is happening at the federal regulatory agencies, they are trying to push companies like that to shut down fossil fuel baseload generators as quickly as possible. This is 100%